Okay, Chairman, we are now live streaming onto Facebook, and over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to Breckland Council's second virtual planning committee meeting. This meeting will be live streamed on the council's social media channels and will be recorded. Once you join the meeting, please remain on mute, which avoids any unnecessary background noise disturbing the meeting. Controls to mute or unmute are displayed on your screen. Julie Britton of Democratic Services Officer will take the roll call to confirm attendance after I've done this presentation. Could you please ensure that you mute or unmute your microphone before speaking to confirm attendance, and then mute again your microphone, as no response will assume that a planning committee member is not in the meeting. Each application has a allotted time slot. There may be an occasion when the time runs over, and therefore attendees will remain in the waiting room until such time their application is ready to be heard. If for any reason discussion finishes earlier than the time slot given, the meeting will be paused. I will work through the agenda, inviting the ward member, applicant, etc. to introduce and speak on each item as appropriate. Attendees for each application will be held in the waiting room until such time their application is heard. Ward members in attendance who have registered to speak on an application will be asked to speak last. A speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes, or in the case of more than one objector or supporter wishing to speak, then they have up to a maximum of 3 minutes in total, which will need to be shared. When an applicant and their agent intended to speak, the 3 minutes are split between the two. Other than when speaking, speakers will remain on mute. If you try to speak when not invited to, you may be required to leave the meeting. I will then check with the Democratic Services Officer in attendance if there are any members who wish to ask a question. If wish to ask a question, please do this by clearly raising your hand, and please remain on mute until invited to speak. I will seek declarations of interest in the usual manner. Members with a declaration should indicate this by raising their hand. The Democratic Service Officer in attendance will invite the councillor to unmute and declare their interest to the chairman. This councillor will at the relevant time be removed from the meeting and placed in the virtual waiting room until discussion and voting on that item has completed, after which they will return to the meeting. Once the application has been discussed and all questions answered, I will ask for a proposer and a seconder. This again will be done by raising your hand. The Democratic Service Officer will then invite each councillor to speak in turn. If a member should experience IT issues during the presentation and does not ask for it to be repeated, they will be unable to vote on the application. For each item, all members will need to confirm that they have heard the application in full before the vote is taken. A roll call will be given for each member to cast their vote, either for, against, or abstain. Please can I remind members that they will need to unmute themselves when responding. Well, that's not strictly correct because we're going to automatically unmute all the members for that. I will now introduce my team for today. I have in attendance, we have Mike Horn, who is solicitor to the council, Rebecca Collins, one of my chief planning officers, Gemma Manthorpe, Becky Harris, Julie Britton and Teresa Smith are in attendance here today. Julie's waving at me. I want you to take the roll call, Julie, but you want to add something else.
And Simon Wood.
Oh, he's there. Sorry. Yes. Where did he sneak in? Simon, where did you sneak in from? I do apologise. Yes, Simon Wood has joined us. He's still with his kitchen cabinets. Okay. So, Julie, can you just call the roll and then I will complete with this other section that I have. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkin.
Here.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Here, Julie.
Councillor Attewell.
Here.
Councillor Bowes.
Here.
Councillor Brame. Councillor Chapman-Allen.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Crane,
Present.
Councillor Dale,
Present.
Councillor Dygan,
Present.
Councillor Gilbert,
Present here.
and Councillor Martin.
Present.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go for my agenda for the day. So my first item, item 1, is to agree the minutes from our last meeting. I don't know why I keep flashing, but there I do. So I'll take an agreement on that unless anyone has an issue they wish to raise. No issues. So rather than well, you can wave your hand if you wish, but I'm going to take it read that you've all agreement with the minutes. Thank you. Number 2, with apologies and substitutes. Well, unfortunately, for some reason, we don't have Councillor Brain, but we don't have an apology either. So for some reason, he's probably stuck in the IT world somewhere trying to get out. But he may join us, but we have not got a substitute plan for him. Item 3, declarations of interest. We will take them as each item is raised. Item 4 is chairman's announcements. Well, first of all, I want to announce that you may be aware of the chairman's panel, of which we decide on the routing of some of our applications. It's now been decided that any member can come on and join in the panel, but not take part in the discussion. So if you want to, if you've never done one, you can come and witness a panel. And some members who have come there for their various ward issues have said they found it very interesting and very informative. So any of you who have not been, I would suggest you at least take the opportunity to come to one of them. Also, it's my birthday tomorrow, so anyone who doesn't know that, I have told most of you, but if anyone happens to come around my house and try and stick a birthday cake through my letterbox, it'll be fine, thank you. And also, our solicitor to the council informs us it's 163 days to Christmas. So thanks for that, Mr. Horn. So we now go to item 5, request to defer applications. I don't believe we have any, Rebecca.
None today, thank you.
Thank you. Item 6, any items of urgent business?
No items of urgent business either, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, that's item 6 done. So we go to item 7, which is a local plan update, and we've got Simon Wood here for that.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to update that following the resolution to carry out a full review of the local plan, we held a meeting of the local plan working group, which other council members were invited to attend, and many did. That was held on the 26th of June. That was to discuss the vision and issue and options arising out of the vision. Members are invited to submit questions in relation to that to the planning policy team by Thursday of this week. And there will be a further meeting of the local plan working group on the 24th of July to discuss and respond to those issues. Thank you, Chairman.
Sorry, I'm flashing again. I couldn't get off. Any questions regarding the local plan update off members, please? No, you're all okay. That's fine, thank you. Item 8 is deferred applications, of which we haven't any for today. So we move on to item 9, which is our schedule of applications. And we have our first item today is at Cranworth, which is application number 3PL 2020-0269. And that's over to you, please, Rebecca, to present that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, we have an application at Cranworth at the Homestead and Hook Lane. The application is a proposal for a new single-storey dwelling. So here is the application site. You can see it circled with a yellow circle on the aerial photography in front of you. And also you can note the surrounding buildings that surround the application site from the aerial photography. So here is the location plan and site layout, which shows, you can see it with a B, underlined B underneath the development, and the application site marked in red. So this is a village without a boundary. So it's a policy HOW 5 consideration in terms of the principle of having development in this location. Policy HOW 5 requires new development in villages without boundaries to be either infill or rounding off. As you can clearly see from this red line location plan, you can see that the building is surrounded by other residential buildings and therefore clearly is infill and supported in principle by policy HOW 5 of the local plan. You can also see the surrounding buildings, and you'll note from the history section of the application that some of those have got approval already for conversion. Here are the elevations of the building as proposed. So as you can see, it's a very modest proposal, single story, very simple in form and architecture, and very modest structure. And here is the proposed layout of the bungalow. You'll note from the officer report that during the process of the application, some concerns were raised by the Highways Authority with regards to visibility. And therefore this plan was provided by the applicants to demonstrate that they can achieve the necessary visibility to raise no concerns about highway safety. And Highways Authority have subsequently removed their concerns in this regard with regards to the access. You'll note from the officer report that they did raise some concerns about the sustainability of the location. However, given that the development's acceptable in principle in accordance with HOW 5, then this wouldn't be a reason for refusing planning permission in this regard. You'll also note from the officer report that the previous access arrangement required the removal of 22 metres of hedgerow. This hedgerow was considered to be historically important under the regulations, and therefore the tree officer initially objected to the proposals on those grounds. However, based on this drawing, which has been assessed by the Highways Authority and the tree officer, it's been demonstrated that only cutting back of the hedgerow is required. And the tree officer isn't concerned any longer in that regard with regards to the loss of the hedgerow, and therefore raises no objection on those grounds. Apologies. So the proposed access based on this plan is now acceptable in highway safety terms, with no objection from the Highways Authority and no objection from the tree officer. So here we have some photos of the application site. So you can see the existing access into the application site, the bell mouth of the application site and the hedgerow that we're talking about. And here you can see the verge, which allows with the cutting back the necessary visibility to meet the highways requirements whilst retaining the hedge. Here's a view from within the site. So you can see the application site in front of you, and also you can see the surrounding buildings. Of particular note is their single-story nature and simple form, which the new dwelling seeks to replicate. Again, this is another image just to demonstrate the application site and the simple buildings that surround it. And here is the view of the access looking from within the site towards Hook Lane. So in terms of the proposals, as I've previously set out, it's a HOW 5 proposal. It is considered to be infill development, which is in principle acceptable. There are no objections from statutory consultees, including no objections from our own ecologists. There was some concerns raised during the application process by a neighbouring property, that there was newts on the site, and images were provided to demonstrate this. Our ecologists have assessed it on these grounds and found that the environment would be a low quality for great crested newts. However, they have suggested a condition which would adequately deal with those if they were found during the development phase. There's no objection from the Historic Environment Service with regards to archaeology. Noting the historic nature of the site, they have requested some recording conditions with regards to the other permissions which surround the application in terms of conversion. But with this site in particular, they raise no objections in terms of archaeology and request no condition to be applied to the application. There's no objection from our historic buildings officer in terms of assessment of them being non-designated heritage assets, and no concerns at all about a new dwelling in this location. And he has confirmed that verbally today, and a response has been uploaded to the website. On the basis that it's in principle acceptable and there's no objections from the statutory consultees, the development is considered acceptable in terms of its appearance and in amenity terms, given that it's only single story and suitable boundary treatment could be erected to protect any neighbouring properties. This application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have Nick and Helena Wilkinson to speak, or just one of you?
It's just myself, if I may.
Okay, that's fine. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to raise our objections with the Planning Committee. Firstly, if we could address the issue of the principal. We actually think the site is a small group of dwellings, which is in an isolated location lying in the countryside. So we would suggest are considered unacceptable for development under HOW 05. Para 333 actually states that in line with sustainability principles, development should be directed to areas identified as having good access to services and facilities. The new build does not fulfil this criteria. The homestead site has actually 2 further undeveloped existing buildings, which should be the focus of any development plans on the site. And Cranworth Parish Council has agreed with these observations. Also, HOW 05 condition 3 would not be achieved, firstly because of sustainability as discussed above, and secondly, as the new build is not in keeping with the historic nature of the site or necessary. All current development has only been to protect existing buildings on the whole site. Under section 7 of the local plan on design, a new build does not preserve the historic nature of the site because the orientation of the building is not in keeping with other residential buildings on the site, which are south facing. The new build is west facing and is also wise, causing us issues with privacy, overlooking our land, and would have line of sight into our home from a couple of places. The new build does not conform with the style and nature of the other buildings on the site and is out of keeping. It may be one level, but this does not follow the positioning or outline shape of other buildings on the site as specified in paras 7.2 and 7.4 of the local plan. The new build is sited to replace a mound known as Mount Sinai by the previous owner and has artefacts buried beneath it. We would suggest there would need to be archaeological work undertaken to properly record and understand these artefacts, which are currently hidden from view. We have seen a famous mural in Building C, which planning has been given, known as the Flying 8-Ball, and therefore important artefacts could exist under Mount Sinai. Moving on to policy COM03 and para 724 regarding noise, dust and traffic, the western boundary of the plot is only partly established with wild roses a hedge, which is unsuitable screening. There will be increased noise and disturbance to us as residents from the cumulative effect of the 3 planning applications, particularly from this new build, being very adjacent to our boundary, and we object on this basis. We would also suggest that any laurel hedge planted would have to offer immediate screening and would need to be of height and density to ensure our privacy is protected. Finally, ENV02, we have seen in Newton May and subsequently photographed it in June, which we thought photos were being shared today. Therefore, we do believe there are newts on site and significant groundworks undertaken on the homestead site may have temporarily displaced them to us. We would welcome any comments or questions on the above. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Rebecca, you wish to make a statement?
I have the photos to share, Chairman. She says confidently. Can you see these? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have Jake Wetherall, please, who's the applicant. Down there. Are you ready to go, sir? If you unmute yourself.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, that's fine. You have 3 minutes.
Good. Okay, perfect. Thank you. I know I probably might repeat some of the stuff Rebecca's already said, so apologies. But I just wanted to give you an overview on the site, really. And as you probably heard, that the site forms part of the World War II accommodation buildings, which were occupied by the US Air Force. And over the last 25 years, all the neighbouring World War II buildings have been mostly refurbished. And I purchased the land in December 2019, which includes a residential bungalow and various derelict outbuildings. The site sits on approximately 2 acres, and the proposed building is in the middle, where there's a large unused parcel of land which originally housed a water storage building. And the reason for the proposed bungalow is to tidy up the site and to make practical use of the otherwise unused land. The proposed building was designed by Nigel Hurrell of NH Building Design, and it's a 1-storey bungalow. It's modest in scale and subservient, and a replica design of the other residential neighbouring properties. So it's in suiting aesthetically, and the design and the enhancement of the historic nature of the site, as well as to make use of the unused retained land. During the planning process, I've made sure that we worked with the planning officer to settle any concerns, to make sure we've covered everything which was required. It was a big financial investment for me to do this, and I've had a full ecological and biodiversity survey which states everything, basically, from bats, newts and everything else, and that survey is part of the reasons why there's conditions on the site. And I instructed an ex-council highways expert to do the visibility spray. We've had numerous tree and hedge surveys, and instructed historic and environmental service and historic buildings consultant who showed no interest in the site as well, which might sort of help answer some of the questions from the neighbour. I understand that the only objection is from the direct neighbour, and any concerns that there have been, I've tried to be rectified as best as I possibly can do using professional companies and by my architect. And we've also agreed to the recommended conditions set on the application by the case officer. When we were planning the application, we made sure we'd considered all the relevant local planning information, such as Cranworth is defined as a village without boundary, and the proposed is an infill development. The proposed building is sensitive infilling and to round off a cluster of dwellings that fits with the scale and the design of the settlement. I know there's a lot of information I can mention, but I think it will be repeating what Rebecca's probably already said. And thanks for your time and listening. Let me speak about the application.
Thank you very much. We now have Councillor Linda Turner, who's the ward rep for that area. Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
3 minutes.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I've been asked to speak on behalf of Cranworth Parish Council on this matter. This site has a fascinating and still relevant today history, as Shipton 115 was the first operational United States Air Force Army station that housed the 44th Bomb Group, who were instrumental in bringing about the end of World War II with its raid on the Romanian oil fields. Its commanders lived on this site as seen in the photograph, and I did send 4 photographs in. In 2015, a full heritage survey was done, and records show that while some of the buildings have been sensitively restored to preserve the wartime wall art, which is of national interest, they have also been modernised to provide modern residential homes, but some remain as they were in 1945. Over the years, a number of planning applications have been made to restore the buildings one by one, and the owners have always complied with Parish Council requests to retain the heritage elements. All applications to date have been approved, as they've all been restorations with no new builds. There have been 3 recent applications by the applicant who lives on site. 2 for refurbishment have been supported by the Parish Council and given planning permission by Breckland Council. The application you see before you today is to build a new home in the centre of the site, although the applicant still has 2 good buildings which are in their original condition and ripe for restoration. The Parish Council deems a new build to be unnecessary and inappropriate. Unnecessary because there are still 2 buildings suitable for restoration as homes, and inappropriate for the reasons Breckland Council gave when an application was refused for a new build on the adjacent meadow. An appeal to that refusal was dismissed by the planning inspector. Cranworth has no services or facilities other than a village hall and the church, and is outside the settlement boundary. In summary, the Parish Council welcomes and supports the sensitive refurbishment of the original buildings, provided any historical artefacts are recorded and preserved. They object to the erection of a new build smack in the centre of this historical site for the reasons above. Thank you, Chairman, and I did submit 4 photos.
Thank you. Did we have those photos at all, Rebecca, the members, or?
Becky Harris, have we got photos from Councillor Turner?
Just having a look, bear with me.
Yeah, I gather they were just of a historic nature. Are you waving, Rebecca?
Yeah, and Chairman, would it be appropriate for me to respond on a couple of points that were raised
Yes,
now
please
while we're
do.
waiting for the photos?
Yeah, please do.
So just with regards to the necessity of the planning application, obviously just to remind members that is not a material planning consideration. You're considering the application in front of you, not what it could be. And with regards to the adjacent site appeal, that was considered pre our current local plan on the grounds of sustainability because we didn't have a 5-year housing land supply. Obviously, we now have a 5-year housing land supply, so we're giving full weight to our current local plan policies, of which HAL 5 is our current local plan policy, which does allow development in locations such as this, but only where it is infill or rounding off. So your officers have made an assessment in that regard and advise you they consider it to be infilling. And obviously with regards to the other points of the policy that was raised, it's up to members to consider the application as presented in front of you as to whether you think they are suitable to the character of the area and the historic nature of the area. But I would remind members that the site isn't visible from the public realm, and therefore, and it's a modest single-storey building, which is in amongst other single-storey buildings, and also that your own historic buildings officer raises no objection on the grounds of impact on a non-designated heritage asset. And also the Historic Environment Service have also assessed it and said there's no impact from a historic environment point of view. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, Becky, have we got those photos now?
Yes, I will share them with you now.
Thank you.
Hopefully you can see this Word document.
Yep, that's fine.
Yep.
Thank you. Shows how the site was in wartime. Okay, it's open to questions from members. Councillor Gilbert, wishing to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Excuse me. Nothing was said about exactly how far this proposal is from surrounding properties. So can we have some indication or exactly how far they are away from other buildings? And also on the issue of infill, my knowledge as I have over many years, and infill is where there is a gap between a linear development mainly. And this surely is infill. Is it infill? I would rather say it is being a modern building being plonked down in the middle of a historical site just because there's a gap to put one in. So can I have answers to exactly how close this building is to other properties and comments on the derivation of infill? Thank you.
Becky, please, or Rebecca, should I say?
Okay, Chairman. So infill is actually defined in your current local plan, members. So infill is defined as a building taking place on a vacant plot in an otherwise built up street frontage. To be considered infill, a development will generally have built development along the road either side of the site and be similar to adjacent properties in terms of visual impact, plot size, dwelling size, floor levels and scale. And rounding off, interestingly, is defined as the completion of an incomplete group of buildings on land which has been already partially developed. So we're saying it is infill and it is rounding off. Chairman, are you okay to take some more questions while I get the exact measurements for Councillor Gilbert?
Thank you. Any other questions from members, please? No. No. Oh, Councillor Attwell, please.
If I just heard that right, what Rebecca has just told us is this isn't infill. It's not a street frontage, is it? And clearly, I would say that's not rounding off because it's been plonked in the middle of a load of other buildings. So to me, that doesn't meet the definition in that policy. So I'd like some clarification on that, please. I think that doesn't meet what you've just said, Rebecca.
So it says, have a built-up development along the road on either side of the site. So it would be your definition of how far away from the road it is, Councillor Attwell, and obviously, councillors, that's your interpretation to take. But us as officers are saying, given that it's surrounded by buildings, that it is infill development. But I will also remind you that that policy says infill or rounding off, which is the completion of an incomplete group of buildings on land which is already partially developed in such a way that will either complete the local road pattern or define and complete the boundaries of the group. Such rounding off should not distort the character or tradition of the group of settlements in an undesirable way. So back to your character argument. And to be considered as rounding off, the statement must address whether the perimeter of the site is already built up, which I can get the location plan back up to show you that. Whether the development will represent an outward expansion of the settlement. Well, we don't have a settlement boundary here, but there are buildings surrounding the site. The strength and durability of the boundary features, so it's surrounded by buildings, and the relationship to the existing settlement. So yes, Councillor Attwell, we would consider it infill because there's no definition of distance to the roadway. However, also if you look at the description of rounding off, that would be important to your considerations on this regard as well.
I think you've found, Councillor Attwell, that's been answered, but have you got another question?
Yes, what I just heard is what we call a subjective view, because the people who live there would say that's already a complete development. All we're doing is putting a modern building in the middle of a group of more historic buildings. I think the local residents and what the parish council say, they consider that that is a complete development. So I don't think rounding off comes into it really. And as for infill, you already said that it's a street view. Well, this is clearly not a street view. So I'm struggling with this one, to be honest. I must say I'm sort of erring with what Councillor Turner said in her comments with regard to the historic nature of the site.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members at all? No. Okay, thank you. So your officer's recommendation. Oh, Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, Rebecca was going to come back with distances from other properties.
I'm trying. Hold on.
Well, Mrs. Wilkinson is on there, who's an objector. Mrs. Wilkinson, do you live, are you the more immediate neighbour? And could you give us a distance, please?
Yes, we are an immediate neighbour. And I would say that it's how far from our boundary? 15 yards from our boundary, and from our house, our property, it's probably 3 times that, I would think. But it's much more adjacent to the property behind it, Building A, and I would say it's more than 15 yards from A.
Okay, thank you very much. Rebecca?
From the nearest point of the proposed dwelling to the nearest point of Hillcrest is 24 metres, so it's a significant distance. And don't forget, it's single storey, and there's a condition about boundary treatments, which would obviously protect the amenity of neighbours.
Okay, that's fine, thank you. That's been answered for you then, Councillor Gilbert. Okay, this item then, which is Cranworth, 3PL 2020-0269. This is a full application. Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. So I'll hand over to Julie of Democratic Services to give us the rundown. Julie, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't seem to, my facility has disappeared where I can unmute everybody. So could all members of the committee unmute themselves now? Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson?
I agree with the officer's recommendation for approval.
Councillor Attewell?
I disagree.
Councillor Bowes?
For.
Councillor Chapman-Allen?
For.
Councillor Clark?
I disagree.
Councillor Crane?
For.
Councillor Dale?
For.
Councillor Digan?
For.
Councillor Gilbert?
Against.
Councillor Martin?
For.
Thank you. 7 in favour and 3 against.
Thank you very much. So thank you. This item is approved. Thank you. Thank you for your time, our visitors.
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry,
Razor?
Chairman. Sorry to interrupt. Can I just make sure that all members were present to hear that application, please?
Yeah, I do apologise. I did have them all on screen. I'm pretty sure everyone did.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that. Okay, thank you. Our next item is at 2 o'clock, which will be Dereham. So I believe that Teresa's going to suspend this meeting till 2 o'clock, till just before 2 o'clock, before we can proceed.